Hello, I'm Batya Osanov and you're watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff to meet Putin for the peace plan discussion. In London, Chancellor of the Exchequer announces 2025 UK budget statement. And Israeli forensic services have identified the remains of a deceased Israeli hostage returned from Gaza as dose of Dror oil. The United States has entered a new stage in its bid to help secure a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, sending envoys back to Kiev and Moscow following a week of high-level negotiations in Geneva.
The United States has opened a new round of shuttle diplomacy after a week of talks in Geneva. President Donald Trump says the revised plan is nearly complete, with only a few issues outstanding. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is meeting the Ukrainian side, while envoy Steve Witkoff prepares for fresh talks with President Putin in Moscow. The Kremlin has confirmed Witkoff's visit. Putin aide Yuri Ushakov says a preliminary agreement is in place for him and other US officials involved in Ukrainian affairs to travel to Moscow next week.
Regarding Witkoff, I can say that a preliminary agreement has been reached that he visits Moscow next week, along with several representatives of US administration who are involved in the Ukrainian affairs.
Ushakov also commented on the recent leak of a phone call between senior US and Russian officials, calling it an attempt to hinder the ongoing contacts.
I guess to hinder. It's unlikely that they do it to improve the Russia-US relations which are now being built through these contacts, including ones over the phone.
From Kiev, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the Geneva talks produced a clear framework for moving forward with the United States and European partners.
Now we have a good result from Geneva and from the meetings and talks that took place there. Ukraine has the framework developed by our teams in Geneva. That framework is on the table, and we are ready to move forward together with the United States of America, with personal engagement of President Trump, and with Europe, with leaders, and with all partners who have their strengths and capacity to help. And I'm ready to meet with President Trump, and there are sensitive points to discuss. We have them still.
While speaking to reporters, Trump said the timing is less important than results.
I don't have a deadline. You know what the deadline for me is? When it's over. And I think everybody's tired of fighting at this moment. They're losing too many people.
Trump also described the revised plan as a step-by-step process involving borderlines and territory issues he called long and complicated.
Well, that was just a map. All that was is a map. That was not a plan. It was a concept. And from there, they've taken each one of the 28 points, and then you got down to 22 points. A lot of them were solved, and actually very favorably solved. So we'll see what happens. It's a long, complicated process, and very sad because so many people have been killed. Steve Witkoff is going over, maybe with Jared. I'm not sure about Jared going, but he's involved in the process. Smart guy, and they're going to be meeting with President Putin, I believe, next week in Moscow.
Witkoff's Moscow trip will be his sixth since the war began, and US officials say any breakthrough now depends on narrowing the remaining territorial and security points.
In related developments, Ukraine sat down with European partners on Tuesday for a coalition of the willing meeting, seeking stronger security commitments as Washington intensifies its push to wrap up a peace agreement.
Right now, when it comes to security, there is nothing to divide.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to advance a US-backed framework for ending the war with Russia and discuss disputed points with US President Donald Trump in talks he said should include European allies. He made the comment in his speech at a virtual meeting with senior leaders and representatives from the Coalition of the Willings, 35 member states, on Tuesday. The gathering was co-chaired by French President Emmanuel Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. During the discussion, leaders reaffirmed their unwavering support for Ukraine and stressed the need for a just and lasting peace. President Zelensky said any future settlement must be backed by robust and credible security guarantees for Ukraine.
We cannot relax or forget that Ukraine still needs defense support, security support, support of our resilience every day. And as long as Russia has not taken real steps toward demobilization, real steps to shut down its war machine, steps that would clearly show that Russia is serious about ending this war of aggression, we do not have the right to stop working to support Ukraine. We must protect lives, strengthen air defense.
Frozen Russian assets were also a key point of discussion. Starmer said the UK was ready to move with the European Union on providing financial support to Ukraine based on the value of immobilized Russian assets.
We need to keep the pressure on Russia. We must move forward with a full embargo of Russian energy. We, the UK, are ready to move with the EU on providing financial support based on the value of the immobilized assets. This is the best way to show Putin he should negotiate rather than trying to outweight us.
Meanwhile, Macron announced a new joint task force led by France and the UK with US and Turkish participation to define the detailed terms of Europe's military support in a future peace deal.
Nous avons décidé d'avancer tout particulièrement sur deux choses dans les prochains jours.
We have to have a reassurance force that will consolidate this Ukrainian army as a second curtain. On this, we decided to launch a working group from tomorrow, driven by France and Great Britain, in close association with Turkey, which plays a key role in the maritime aspect, and, for the first time, with an involvement of the United States of America. The following days will allow us to very precisely finalize the contributions of each one and to have these security guarantees finalized.
Leaders wrapped up the meeting by underscoring their continued unity and commitment to supporting Ukraine, saying lasting peace will depend on firm pressure on Russia and solid security guarantees for Kyiv.
Now, against the backdrop of the peace developments, Russia says it has carried out large-scale strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure overnight, using long-range precision weapons in response to recent Ukrainian attacks. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the assault included hypersonic missiles as well as attack drones. Moscow claims the strikes targeted Ukraine's defense industry and the energy facilities that support it. Kyiv says there were extensive power outages and damage to civilian areas in Kyiv and surrounding areas. Israel has identified the remains of Dror Or, an Israeli hostage whose body was handed over on Tuesday by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the Prime Minister's office said on Wednesday. Or and his family were sheltering in their home in Kibbutz Be'eri during the October 7, 2023 attack, when Milton set the house on fire. Israeli officials say Or and his wife were killed as they tried to escape. Militants took Or's body to Gaza along with two of his children who were later released in November 2023 hostage deal. To global disasters now, countries across several continents are dealing with severe natural events, from widespread flooding in Southeast Asia to destructive storms in Brazil and the United States.
Floods have affected 9 provinces in Thailand, 8 states in Malaysia and parts of Indonesia, leading to evacuations of nearly 45,000 people. Thailand has declared its southern Songkhla province a disaster zone after heavy rainfall left thousands stranded and at least 33 people dead. More than 2 million people in Thailand have been affected by the floods, but just 13,000 have been moved to shelters. Authorities in Thailand are using helicopters to evacuate critically ill patients from a hospital in Hat Yai. Floods and landslides killed at least 13 people and injured dozens after torrential rain struck Indonesia's island of Sumatra. Torrential rain has hit the region for several days, flooding parts of multiple districts since Monday. Heavy rainfall and flooding also damaged 330 houses and displaced 2,244 people in several areas. In neighbouring Malaysia, flooding from days of heavy rain swept through 8 states, with forecasters predicting more rain in the region in the coming days. Natural disasters are also hitting other parts of the world. A hailstorm left 246 people injured and caused infrastructure damage in the south of Brazil. Hailstones damaged vehicles and roofs as over 10,000 families were affected. Extraordinary footage captures a property being pummeled by hailstones described as baseball-sized. Severe weather has also struck the US. A tornado ripped through Willowbrook, Texas, leaving behind damaged homes and downed trees. First responders are actively searching for any injured or trapped residents. The storm left around 28,000 people without power in the Houston area. On Tuesday, lava was seen spewing out of Kilauea volcano after one of the world's most active volcanoes erupted again in Hawaii. Lava fountained at approximately 400 feet as ash and smoke spewed into the air. According to the United States Geological Survey, this is the 37th time Kilauea has erupted since December 2024.
Britain's autumn budget has been unveiled in the House of Commons as Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves pledges to ease the cost of living and bring down inflation.
Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves announced the autumn budget in the House of Commons on Wednesday. The Chancellor began by acknowledging the early release of the Office for Budget Responsibility report, which detailed the contents of the budget, calling it deeply disappointing. The document, normally published after the Finance Minister's speech, had been uploaded to the OBR's website and made available via an unprotected link.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is my understanding that the Office of Budget Responsibility's Economic and Financial Outlook was released on their website before this statement. This is deeply disappointing and a serious error on their part. The Office for Budget Responsibility have already made a statement taking full responsibility for their breach.
Reeves unveiled billions of pounds in tax increases in an effort to fill a black hole in the public finances. She also said the budget would provide immediate relief for families and help bring down inflation.
Today's budget builds on the choices that we have made since July last year. To cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living, and to cut debt and borrowing. No doubt we will face opposition again, but I have yet to see a credible or a fairer alternative plan for working people.
Reeves also announced government funding for a new youth guarantee, which she said would provide £820 million over the next 3 years. The initiative builds on a youth guarantee announced last November, which promised every 18 to 21-year-old in England access to an apprenticeship, training, education opportunities, or help finding a job.
To a political storm now, as Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro has been ordered to start serving his 27-year sentence. The far-right populist governed Latin America's largest democracy from 2019 until 2022 and was convicted for plotting a coup.
Brazil's Supreme Court has ordered that former President Jair Bolsonaro begin serving his 27-year prison sentence for plotting a coup after his 2022 election loss. Justice Alexandre de Moraes ruled the case has reached its final judgment and that no further appeals are possible, meaning the 70-year-old will start his term in a federal police jail cell in Brasilia. where he has been held since Saturday. The four judges, Alexandre de Moraes, Flavio Dino, Cristiano Zanin and Carmen Lucia, said Bolsonaro poses a flight risk and has repeatedly violated court orders. The ruling ends more than 100 days of house arrest. Authorities said Bolsonaro used a soldering tool on his ankle monitor ahead of a planned supporters' vigil outside his home, which the court said could disrupt police surveillance. In a custody hearing, he claimed medication-induced paranoia and hallucinations that led him to believe the device was wiretapped and denied any intent to flee. Justice Flavio Dino wrote that Bolsonaro's admission of tampering shows a clear violation of judicial measures and increases the risk of escape. Federal police have also previously reported that he considered seeking asylum abroad. Outside the Federal Police headquarters, left-wing activists celebrated the ruling, while supporters demanded amnesty and insisted the former president is the target of political persecution.
French authorities have arrested a fourth person in connection with the jewel heist at the Louvre Museum in October, where a gang stole $102 million. The suspects, 2 men and 2 women from the Paris region, include a 39-year-old believed to be the gang's fourth member. Authorities say the stolen jewels haven't yet been recovered. Meanwhile, 3 other suspects were previously arrested and charged with theft and criminal conspiracy. China has set its strongest yuan fixing in over a year, signaling confidence following a high-profile call between President Xi and Donald Trump aimed at easing tensions and boosting economic cooperation. The move comes as markets anticipate U.S. rate cuts and Beijing works to steady its currency and reassure investors. Our correspondent Mahnur Maktoum has more.
The People's Bank of China has set the daily yuan fixing at 7.0796 per USD, which is the strongest and most valuable the yuan has been in over a year. The decision comes just days after the highly publicized phone call between Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping, during which both sides showed efforts to stabilize ties and expand economic cooperation, including China's purchase of additional U.S. agricultural goods. By guiding the yuan stronger, Beijing is projecting confidence at a moment when Washington and Beijing are tentatively easing tensions, creating an environment in which both sides want to avoid currency volatility that could complicate trade discussions. The timing also aligns with growing expectations of Federal Reserve rate cuts, which could weaken the dollar and naturally support yuan appreciation. Although China's underlying economic fundamentals remain subdued with sluggish growth, weak domestic demand, and limited external capital, the decision shows a strategic policy choice to maintain yuan stability and support investor confidence. For China and global markets, a stronger yuan carries several implications. Exporters may face tighter margins, but importers and foreign currency denominated debt holders benefit. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Now we continue with breaking news. At least 14 people have died and dozens have been injured in Hong Kong after a massive fire engulfed multiple high-rise towers in a residential complex. Emergency teams were on site working to put out a blaze, but authorities say firefighting and search operations were difficult as temperatures inside the burning buildings were extremely high. The Wang Fu Court housing complex where the fire began is home to 2,000 residential apartments across 8 blocks. Officials say they do not yet have a figure for how many people may still be inside the buildings. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Moscow's anticipated response to the U.S.-backed Ukraine peace plan and what this potential diplomatic shift could mean for the path forward. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. All eyes are now on Moscow as the Kremlin prepares its response to a fledgling U.S.-backed peace plan for Ukraine. Washington Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected in Moscow next week, while President Zelensky is seeking a visit with President Donald Trump in the United States later this week, signaling a potential diplomatic shift on all sides. To help us understand what these developments could mean for the war, diplomacy and Ukraine's strategic calculations, we're joined by Andriy Ordonovich, retired colonel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, speaking to us from Kiev. Mr. Ordonovich, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me once more time.
Thanks. Colonel Ordonovich, what's your initial reaction to Moscow preparing to review this US-backed peace framework?
First and foremost, the diplomatic channel is present. It is already a good sign for both sides, for Ukrainian side as well as Russian side. We have to keep it open, the diplomatic channel. And we are happy that US government are watching on it and wanted somehow to facilitate, mitigate the resolution of this war of aggression, Russian aggression against Ukraine. We are quite optimistic. Based on previous draft of so-called 28 points, is not workable at all because it was probably advised or written in Russia without any consultation or any thoughts from Ukrainian side. After the Geneva talks with our partners, it's how formulated already 9 points and already including some Ukrainian proposition, which it is visible on the open mass media. But I believe that this diplomacy should work. On the ground, in the front line, we are trying to defend. We are trying to deter further penetration of Russian to Ukrainian soil and hope that it could help to be more resilient and more strong on the diplomatical field.
Colonel Ordonovich, in your opinion, how significant is Steve Witkoff's upcoming visit to Moscow in the broader diplomatic picture?
The special envoy of United States to Russia and the Ukrainian war of aggression is also a good sign that they're keeping open a diplomatic channel of communication. I hope that results of Geneva talks with Ukraine would have some positive impact. In other case, we will face some huge challenges because if we would rely on and make in favor of Russia on the beginning of talks, it could create to the end of some kind of bad results for the lasting and lasting peace. Second, the Ukrainian side should be heard from the US and the Russian side because we did not start this war. War of aggression was waged by Russians. And it is also very important to understand that after the 1945 ending of World War II, it was actually illegal and crime to change by force any borders between country, and Helsinki Agreement in 1975 was completely about it, that for forcefully changing borders, it is already unacceptable. If it's not going to be counted, I believe the new international security system based on law or rules are going to be ended if the Ukrainian voices are not going to be heard.
So President Zelensky is reportedly seeking a visit with President Donald Trump. How important is this outreach right now?
In any case, the chain of communication or line of communication between our president, the Ukrainian president, the US president are very positive step forward. First and foremost, the president of the United States recently referred that this kind of Geneva talks, it is already a big progress. Second, for us, a crucial issue, what kind of peace is going to be presented. And I believe that this kind of peace agreement should have at least two folds. First and foremost, that it is to be honored by Ukraine, And second one, it would give some kind of deterrence of further war of aggression against Russia. And we are happy that until now, this document, so-called living, and could be changed in more time. And first, I believe it would defend a couple red lines. First of all, it is preserve our sovereignty. Second one, it is preserve our independence. And thirdly, we have to have a very profound security guarantee in order to avoid further Russian aggression if they will decide to do it. False peace without consideration of Ukrainian points will plant seeds which are going to lead to the further bloodshed, as well as make a broader security threat to EU and United States included.
So do you see any risks for Ukraine if talks begin before Russia shows concrete willingness to compromise?
Russian willingness, it is a key point, I would say, because Ukraine is open for negotiation. Ukraine is open more than other nations right now for the peace agreement, but also Ukraine has to be heard on their bullets. If Russia will have a political will, war of aggression is going to end it even tomorrow, yesterday. But if they do not have a will, and probably we are very much rely on the President Trump, his negotiation skills, as well as his administration, to mitigate of this peace deal with to have like just and lasting one, because short peace is gonna give a short break for new preparation and further escalation with Ukraine. Russia has to change their foreign policy, aggressive foreign policy towards Ukraine. Ukraine has to have in this peace the kind of indication on the security guarantee, which could be related to the coalition on willings, which are started to develop their plans. It could be also fix the numbers of Ukrainian troops, but if we would not have this kind of possibility, we have to be responsible by ourselves, develop still very much effective long-range capability, and if we would have it, I believe it's gonna help to little bit mitigate in a peaceful manner or peaceful mode of negotiation.
Colonel Ordonovich, I think that it's also important. How does the Ukrainian military assess the current battlefield dynamics in the context of these diplomatic moves?
Probably, as you know, for the entire year, we are trying to pull out Russian from Ukrainian territory.
Yes.
In some area, it's giving a positive sign. In other area, we are still in defensive, active defense, and trying to be very strongly resilient to it around Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. The Ukrainian military doing the best in order to show up to Russian that the easy way to occupy entire Ukraine or further proceeding to Ukraine is going to cost a lot. And already some figures and statistics are proven that it is a real case, because the Russians, since 2022, from outset of this aggression, the number of troops, what they are losing during the gaining very small piece of Ukrainian land are very, very high. And compared with the 2022, it is 30% increase, because in 2022 it was for 1 square kilometer casualties was counted like 1 from Russian side. In 2023, 2024, it became already like around Bakhmut and Avdiivka, almost 300 troops been in casualties. And as for now, it is 150 or 200, it depends of the day, they are getting casualties. I mean, all gaining land, Ukrainian land from Russian side, is very much costly. Second, our long-range capabilities are really undermining the Russian economy and war machine. And we are gonna continue this strategy to undermine their efforts in order to fuel the war machine and bring more people. And they started to face already serious challenges, including in their manpower, because to get more people to this war of aggression, which are very much bloody, at hitting some regular Russians, it should come eventually, I believe, sooner than later, to Russian political leadership that this journey to Ukraine with a war of aggression is going to be not pleasant for them.
And finally, based on your own experience, what would a viable, realistic peace agreement need to include for Ukraine?
Again, as I mentioned before, the forceful changing border is it is unacceptable. What I could believe that it would be a reasonable compromise. It is a temporary occupied territory is not gonna be recognized by international community. It's gonna last some period of time until the people on their territory, as well as Russia, will change their course of action and course of direction their foreign policy. Because to having such neighbor very much aggressive, very brutal, it's very actually tough to live and very actually tough to tackle it. And I believe that some concession is going to be related, that temporary occupied territory of Ukraine is going to be not recognizable. We would have on Ukrainian soil coalition of willings. Right now, on this coalition is counted already 35 nations, peaceful nations, which are wishing Ukraine to live peacefully, to live in prosperity, to be on the globe as a recognizable country with a proper identity, culture, and tradition. If it is not going to be allowed to Ukraine to join a collective defense, we have to have someone on the ground in Ukraine, on boots, in order to have a strategic deterrence against further Russian war of aggression, if they will not change their foreign policy.
Colonel Andrei Ornovich, thank you very much for talking to A News and joining us from Kiev. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Turkey hosts the first day of the 11th World Halal Summit and Halal Expo. This year's event features halal cuisine, showcases international conferences and business meetings to foster global trade and strengthen commercial ties. Our correspondent Aliya Imam has more.
Today marks the opening day of the 11th World Halal Summit and Halal Expo here in Istanbul, a major global gathering running through the 29th of November. The summit and expo bring together the international halal ecosystem, drawing tens of thousands of visitors from across the world. The Halal Expo is one of the leading international trade fairs in this sector, uniting companies, investors, and professionals across halal food, cosmetics, finance, textiles, tourism, and healthcare. Held annually in Istanbul, it serves as a key platform connecting millions of consumers and businesses embracing the halal lifestyle under one roof. This year's event is organized by the Turkish presidency in cooperation with the Standards and Metrology Institute for Islamic Countries and supported by Turkey's Trade Ministry, also the Halal Accreditation Agency. Organizers expect more than 50,000 visitors from over 110 countries, with exhibitors representing more than 40 nations, including Turkic nations, such as Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, as well as several European and African states. I had a chance to interview participants from Azerbaijan and Japan, and they provided their insights and their representation on the Halal Expo.
This honey is called Zangezur. We showcase honey collected from the flowers of the Karabakh region. The region is home to a rich variety of flowers, which attracts strong interest from visitors.
Halal is the sign which shows the cleanness and then the food is prepared properly. So for me, I don't want to promote halal only Muslim. I want to promote halal to non-Muslim as well. So I try to make it very entertaining for my contents. But when I teach what halal is, I am very careful because sometimes Japanese people do not really understand what halal is, and there is still misunderstanding. And I try to differentiate what halal certificate and a Muslim friendly because it's very different.
Turkey's Minister of Trade Ömer Bolat attended the official opening and toured both international and domestic pavilions. Throughout the week, attendees will join conferences, cooperation forums, and B2B meetings, all aimed at expanding global trade links and strengthening commercial partnerships. This is Aliye Iman reporting from the Halal Expo here in Istanbul, Turkey, A News.
And Pope Leo XIV is preparing for his first apostolic visit to Turkey and Lebanon, a 6-day trip focused on ecumenical commemoration, interreligious dialogue and support for local Christian communities. The trip includes stops in Ankara, Istanbul, Iznik and Beirut, with a major commemoration marking 1700 years since the Council of Nicaea. The Pope will meet political and religious leaders, visit mosques and churches, and take part in ceremonies highlighting Christian unity. In Lebanon, he will pray at the port in memory of the 2020 explosion and meet young people at the Maronite Patriarchate. The program also features meetings with Muslim, Jewish and Druze leaders as part of wider outreach. The Vatican says the trip carries a strong message of unity at a time of regional tension. Iran's foreign minister has made a rare trip to Paris for talks with his French counterpart, focusing on prisoner exchanges and stalled nuclear negotiations. His visit comes amid new diplomatic signals, including reports of possible Saudi mediation between Tehran and Washington. Our correspondent Tuvraj Shiralilo has more.
Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi met with French foreign minister Jean-Noël Barrot in Paris on Wednesday in an infrequent visit by an Iranian top diplomat to the French capital in recent years to discuss exchange of Iranian and French prisoners as well as Tehran's nuclear issue. Araghchi and Barrot last met in September on the sidelines of UN General Assembly in New York, during which their talks focused on extradition of 1 Iranian and 2 French citizens jailed in France and Iran. During their visit to the UN headquarters, the 2 foreign ministers also held a joint meeting with their British and German counterparts, as well as EU foreign policy chief, discussing the move by the European Troika to refer its dispute on Iran's nuclear program to the UN Security Council. Earlier in August, France, together with Germany and the UK, also known as E3, called for reinstallment of UN nuclear sanctions on Iran before Resolution 2231 expired in September. Last October, Iran's Secretary of Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, said the French foreign minister promised in New York that if Iran and IAEA reach an agreement on inspections, the E3 would withdraw its call for return of sanctions. However, it failed to do so after Iran and UN nuclear watchdog reached such a deal in Cairo in September. Araghchi's visit to Paris coincides with unconfirmed reports that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, in his letter to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman last week, has agreed with mediation of Riyadh in the nuclear dispute between Tehran and Washington. Tuvraj Shiralilo, Tehran, A News.
Tensions are rising along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border after deadly overnight airstrikes. The United Nations is urging restraint and respect for international law as both sides exchange sharp statements. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the latest from Kabul.
It was just after midnight on Tuesday morning when the airstrikes hit Afghanistan's Khost and Kunar provinces. According to the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, at least 10 civilians were killed, most of them children. Another 6 people were injured. In a statement, UNAMA called for, quote, respect for international law to protect civilians and prevent civilian harm. The mission has urged all parties to avoid further escalation. The strikes believed to have been carried out by the Pakistani military prompted a swift and furious response from Afghanistan. Officials condemned the attacks as a violation of Afghanistan's airspace and sovereignty, calling them a clear breach of international norms. Afghanistan also accused Pakistan of acting on what it described as incorrect information, saying such operations bring nothing but, quote, disgrace and failure to Pakistan's military establishment. In its statement, the Afghan authorities asserted that defending the country's territory and people is its legitimate right, promising what it called an appropriate response at the right time. A spokesman of the Pakistan's military denied involvement in the incident, stating that when we strike, we own it. Despite this, Afghan officials insist that Pakistan was responsible for the airstrike. But tonight, the international community is watching closely, concerned that any further retaliation could deepen instability along a tense and heavily militarized border. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Railway officials from across the Commonwealth of Independent States met in Baku to set next year's priorities for regional transport. They reviewed freight trends, tariff plans and progress on the main international corridors.
We're in Baku, where the 83rd meeting of the CIS Council for Rail Transport is about to begin. Railway leaders and officials from more than a dozen countries have gathered here to coordinate how the region's rail networks will operate in the year ahead. They're meeting to review freight performances, set tariff policies for 2026, and discuss the development of the major transport corridors that link Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East.
The meeting brought together rail authorities from across the CIS to assess recent traffic flows and decide where network capacity needs to expand. A key focus this year was improving efficiency along the transport corridors that cross the Caspian Basin and connect Asian and European markets.
This corridor will be the main corridor which will connect east with the west using the route via Azerbaijan, making the Trans-Caspian route more developed and more sufficient, and estimated volume of cargo, which we're estimating to start in 2030, is to 3 to 4 million ton of cargo per annum per year.
During the plenary session, Azerbaijan Railways chairman Rovshan Rustamov highlighted the country's recent investments, saying Azerbaijan had strengthened its position on the global transport map.
Last year, Azerbaijan and Russia signed a synchronization agreement on the development of transit shipments within the North-South International Transport Corridor. The document provides for the modernization of railway infrastructure and the gradual expansion of freight volumes. For example, from the 1st of January 2028, we plan to increase traffic along this route to 5 million tons and later aim to bring it up to 15 million tons per year.
Delegates also discussed ways to align standards, remove bottlenecks, and improve coordination with partners beyond the CIS.
The 83rd meeting of the CIS Council for Rail Transport has now wrapped up. Delegates reviewed the performance of the CIS rail network over the first 9 months of the year and outlined plans to strengthen cooperation and improve connectivity across the wider region. A protocol of the meeting has been signed along with a separate memorandum of understanding between Azerbaijan, Iran and Russia, a step the sides say will help deepen long-term cooperation and support the western branch of the North-South Transport Corridor. Sabina Abubekirova, A News.
Leaders from several post-Soviet states are preparing to meet in Kyrgyzstan for a key security summit. Our correspondent in Almaty, Fariza Kalimurzina, reports on the preparations, the expected agenda, and the regional significance of the Collective Security Treaty Organization's meeting.
In Kyrgyzstan, temporary traffic restrictions are in place in Bishkek and the Chuy region from November 25 to 27. The measures are linked to a session of the Collective Security Treaty Organization's Security Council. The Ministry of Internal Affairs has urged drivers not to leave vehicles on the roadside, to expect delays and to follow traffic police instructions. Schools in the capital have been moved to online learning during these dates. Higher education institutions are also operating remotely while the summit is taking place. Security in Bishkek is being maintained by around 4,000 police officers with heightened measures at the venues and surrounding areas. The summit will focus on key issues such as regional security, combating illegal drug trafficking, and managing migration. Leaders are also expected to discuss who will take over as Secretary General for the next 3 years term. The current Secretary General's mandate ends next year. And Kyrgyz Deputy Secretary General Talatbek Masadikov is among the potential candidates. The session is scheduled for November 27th. Among the world leaders attending the summit is Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has arrived in the capital on an official visit. After a series of bilateral meetings, he will join the discussions alongside other leaders, including those from Belarus, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. And Armenia, which suspended its participation in 2024, has once again confirmed it will not send a delegation. The CSTO, established in the early 2000s on the basis of the Collective Security Treaty, is intended to maintain peace and collective defense. Member states have different perspectives on its role, but previous meetings have highlighted the importance of coordination. And Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has described the CSTO as an important element of regional security. All eyes in Bishkek are now on the summit, with leaders preparing to meet and discuss issues that could shape the organization's agenda for years to come. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
And Tashkent hosts its third major EU Central Asia Forum, turning a political dialogue into concrete economic cooperation. Leaders and experts discuss trade, connectivity and resilient value chains, aiming to boost investment and integrate Central Asian economies into global markets. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova has more.
The Tashkent Forum marks the third major gathering between the European Union and Central Asia, a platform aimed at turning political dialogue into practical economic cooperation. Leaders, ministers and private sector experts discussed how to strengthen trade, improve connectivity and build more resilient value chains across the region. Connectivity and stability were highlighted as essential foundations for investment, especially as Central Asian countries seek to integrate into global markets and diversify their economies. The International Trade Center emphasized the importance of supporting businesses across the region, from improving competitiveness to expanding access to new markets and developing sustainable value chains.
Of course, today, among the areas of interest to the European Union are, first of all, critical minerals, digital transformation, IT, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and green energy. And all these areas are actively developing in our countries today. As I noted in my speech, Central Asia has enormous potential in the field of green energy. Our region can produce very competitive electricity, which can then be exported. Our leaders of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan are already thinking about implementing a project on a green corridor to Europe through the Caspian Sea.
Officials here say the forum is also an opportunity for Central Asian countries to highlight their own priorities, from attracting investment and modernizing infrastructure to strengthening cooperation with European partners.
I think a very important area where we need to expand our relationship, and which is obviously going to be talked about, is the transport connections. And that is the Transport Corridor Conference tomorrow, which brings together not only the countries of Central Asia and the European Union, but also the countries from the South Caucasus. We have here Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, and also Turkey.
The forum comes at a time when trade between the European Union and Central Asia has already reached substantial levels. In 2022, the total trade was about $50.5 billion. Last year, the overall European Union Central Asia trade, including goods and services, was estimated at roughly $62.5 billion. Experts expect this forum to lay the groundwork for deeper economic integration and further growth. It is Sivil Rajapur reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
You're up to date with World News for an hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.